the seventh time that we've done this convention, as you guys know, and so every time the Guns N' Roses "Welcome to the Jungle" comes on, I kind of wish it would stay on just a little bit longer. I don't know about you, but it's a cool way to walk onto the stage, and this is such a blessing today, especially when you have people that you love in the front row and people around the room that you care so much about and that you've been through a lot with. You know, I am very humbled and I'm very honored to get to round out our core values today. And, you know, undoubtedly, as you listened to the stories that Billy told, the video that we saw, Adam's example, Heather's incredible example, the story that Rich told, you know, there has been a theme across the entire day in all the stories. And what is that theme? This is where we get feedback. So what is the theme across all the stories, all the messages from today? Growth, learning, leaning into the challenge, because that's when growth happens. And so I want to spend the next few minutes talking about that for you. You know, because the title of today, as you guys know, is Mapping Your Future. And speaking of maps, over the last couple of weeks, all of you have been through the Learning Map experience. So hands up if you went through the Learning Map experience. Yeah, awesome. What'd you think of that? That was great, wasn't it? Yeah, so this visual will look familiar because what we did as a part of that experience is we spent some good interactive time exploring the vision of defenders through the use of a map. So you got to experience Defender's map. Guys, what about your map? Who's building your map? You know, we spent months as a leadership team working and things out and debating and to come up with this. So what about your map? You know, you have this great workbook today. Matthew talked about always having pen and paper so you can note things down. You've got a great resource in your packet. If you haven't noticed it, look at that very last page. You've got a place to do just what we did through Defender's Learning Map. You've got a place to think about your life in different ways. Your spiritual life, your financial life, your career life, your social life, your financial life. What if you took time with a significant other or even on your own with a trusted friend, with your family, and thought about what do we want our life to look like in 2026? You know, think about what a great experience that would be to create this vision of the future. Because there's power in that. There's power in the present when you have something to work towards. So let's imagine then that you spend some time really thinking about what you want that vision to look like. And you've got a map. Well, what got you here is not going to get you there. So I want to talk about being a growth-oriented learner in that space between where you are today and where you want to be. Because that space is filled with all kinds of growth opportunities. You know, you guys have heard lots of stories today, but each of you have a remarkable story and unique experiences. And you're all walking around with stuff on your mind, stuff in your heart. And, you know, it is the stuff of life. It is challenge. But we can use those challenges as momentum to make us better, to help propel us. So here's what I want you to do. Somewhere in your packet, I want you to note down something that you're walking around with, a growth opportunity for you, a challenge. I mean, is there anybody in the room that would say, I'm challenge free? I want to hang out with you if that's the case. No, and I would hope that nobody would raise their hand because that's good stuff that we can use to propel us. So take a minute and write that down in your workbook because we're going to use it. So maybe, DJ Mike, could we have some fun writing challenge music? Maybe 30 seconds. Write it down. Okay, great. All right, I'm hopeful that the next few minutes then are really personal to you as you think about how might I use this growth opportunity or this challenge that I've noted to really become a better version of me, to work towards the future that I am mapping. So we're going to look at 4 very specific things that you can do to lead through this challenge, to really lean into it. And it starts, guys, with knowing what you want. So think about in relation to that challenge, what's the ideal? If it's a relationship challenge, rather than focusing on the challenge, what is it that you want in the relationship? So it starts with knowing what you want. Once you know what you want, then you can put a plan in place to actually do something differently to realize the vision of what it is you want. But you first got to know, what do I want? We often get so stuck in the muck of what is that we don't have the headspace to dream or think about, what do I want this to look like? So you got to step out of the problem long enough to visualize, what could this be for me? Have a plan and then be a sponge. All around you are growth-oriented learners and people who care about you and want the best for you, and lean into them and learn from them and ask questions. My colleague and friend Amanda Races has a great mantra for being a sponge. She says, I'm not going to learn anything new by talking today. So she uses every interaction and experience as an opportunity to lean in and learn something differently. And then the last one, we're going to spend some time on demonstrating grit, because this is where you know what you're made of. It's easy to smile and have your head up when things are going well, in the peaks of our life. But what about those times that are valleys or are challenging for us? And maybe the thing that you wrote down represents that for you. How do you lean into that with a lot of grit? That's actually where I want to start. So there's a book called Mindset. How many of you have read the book Mindset? It is a Defender's favorite. I know it's in our library. And in her book, Mindset, Carol Dweck defines a growth mindset this way. I love, love, love this definition because it's such a good reminder for us that we get to choose in relation to that challenge how we want to respond to it. And we can respond to it with a growth mindset. So having a passion for stretching yourself and sticking with it, especially, I love the especially when it's not going well. Having a passion for sticking with it, stretching yourself, especially when it's not going well. So the opposite of this is a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset basically means that you feel like whatever it is can't be changed in a meaningful way, or so it's fixed. Your characteristics are basically fixed and can't be changed in a meaningful way. Here's a simple example of the difference between the two. So let's say you decide to take up tennis, something you've never done before. So you sign up for a series of tennis lessons, and the first lesson goes horribly wrong. Balls are flying everywhere, you can't figure out this whole backstroke thing, maybe you get hit in the head, I don't know. So the growth mindset at the end of that first lesson would say something like, okay, that's good, because I learned some things I need to do differently, and so my next lesson is going to go way better. The fixed mindset, on the other hand, would probably say something like, okay, I'm not good at tennis. Might as well check that one off and try something else. Well, I don't know about you, but I fall into that fixed mindset a lot. I've often said as a trainer and a coach that I teach the things I need to learn the most. So my number one item in my IDP is developing more of a growth-oriented learner mentality in the midst of challenges. I was in a mentoring session with my mentor just a few weeks ago, and he was highlighting a weakness area of mine, and it hurt. I did not like the conversation, and I heard myself getting defensive and saying, well, I'm just not good at that. That is not a strength area of mine. I've never been good at that, and you know what? I never will be. Of course not with that attitude. Of course not with that fixed mindset. The growth-oriented learner in that situation says, yeah, you know what? This is something I've always struggled with, and this is something I can get better at. If I find the right resources, if I figure out what I want, I put a plan in place, and I become a sponge around it. So think about that challenge that you wrote down. How are you approaching it? Are you approaching it with the growth mindset of, yeah, this is hard, and this is fun, maybe not fun, but this is hard and I can learn something here? Or is it hands up, yeah, that's nothing I'm going to be good at. I can't get better in that. Here's the thing, guys. The choice is up to you. How you choose to show up in relation to that challenge, that's so empowering? 100% of the time is within your control. 100% of the time within your control. So this growth mindset is really important because life is not a straight line to success. Check out this visual. I love this visual. Your plan versus reality. How many of you can relate to this visual? Yes, we all can, because this is life. And so the growth mindset doesn't say that personal success is about reaching that finish line. No, with the growth mindset, personal success is about working your hardest. That's where the success is. About leaning in and staying in it versus blaming or pointing fingers. I also, when I look at this visual, which of those is more interesting? Reality. Yeah, I want to hang out with that guy in the boat. That looks a lot more fun than the straight path. And isn't that true, really, when we reflect back on situations that were really challenging for us? That's where the growth happened. Those are the real valuable situations. So I got into running a few years ago. Mason, my 14-year-old daughter, was just a couple years old, so it would have been around 2004-ish, and I was working a lot, I was single, and I found myself really pouring into my work a lot, and I neglected myself and the athleticism that I had through high school and college, and so I gained a lot of weight, and I was talking with some colleagues. I was consulting with a firm called Flashpoint at that time, and I was talking to some of my colleagues at Flashpoint and grumbling a little bit about not feeling good, and one of them said, well, we're training for the mini marathon, you should try that. Oh my gosh, there's no way I could run more than 2 miles. But I did. I started running with them, and I got onto a training plan, and so I fell in love with running. It's a great stress reliever for me. It's a lot of fun to do that with friends. And so I've had a lot of fortune in running some really, really cool races. So this picture is from one of my favorite races, the Las Vegas Marathon, and my friend Tracy took this at the end of the race. It was a great moment, but it's interesting as I reflect back on all my races and the training for the races. I've got a lot of these kinds of pictures, but these aren't the moments that really stand out to me about those experiences. It's like the previous visual with the ups and downs. It's those valleys, those tough moments where I picked myself up and kept going. Those are the moments that remind me of accomplishment. Those are the ones that provide motivation. There's one particular moment I'll never forget. So I was training for my first full marathon, and that was my goal. I wanted to run a full marathon. I had not done that, and I thought that could be a good challenge for me. So through that training program, I had on a Saturday morning, I had a plan to run 20 miles. So I set out, and I felt pretty good, and then at mile 18, I hit that wall that I'd heard about. Okay, there that is, I said. And I was running down a street near my home. I was 2 miles from my house, and there was a patch of grass next to the path I was running on. And I ran, and I slowed, and I collapsed in the grass. And hurt from head to toe, felt awful. All kinds of options started running through my head, calling a friend, walking if I could get up the rest of the way. And then I remembered my goal. Remember, know what you want. I wanted to run a full marathon because I had never done that. And I had a plan. That day, I was going to run 20 miles. And I knew that Mason, when I got home, was going to ask me how it went, so there was some built-in accountability. And that is what got me up. And it's those moments where you dig deep, where you realize what you're made of. That's the sense of accomplishment. So personal success is not about reaching the finish line. Personal success is not about getting the medal. Personal success is about working really hard to do your best. That's the growth mindset. The growth mindset will set you free. because you no longer then have to prove to anyone. Everything becomes an opportunity for growth and for learning. So there are a lot of growth-oriented learners in this room. I know that because I know so many of you. And we could have highlighted hundreds of leaders across the business. You know, even the videos that you've seen, Adam and Heather, are such good examples of growth-oriented learners. And yet, there's one particular leader that for me is a hero of this value. So we're going to watch a video of Chris Evers, our Director of Field Services Operations, and he's such a great example of a growth-oriented learner, both personally and professionally. Let's learn from his story. You'll see, know what you want, have a plan, be a sponge, and demonstrate grit.
I'm Chris Evers. I've been with Defenders for 14 years, and I'm the Director of Field Service Operations. I started out in Homewood, Illinois, which is a south suburb of Chicago, back in 2002 as a security advisor. And after a couple of years, I had the opportunity to become the security manager of the branch, and loved the job. The money was so good that I didn't really think that I needed to go to college. So I stopped going for a little while. I would maybe take a class here and there, one class a semester, and then stop for a little while, but there was no consistency to it. In 2007, I got a job offered in a director role for field services. My wife and I sold the house and moved down to Indianapolis to start my career with Defenders at the home office. I wanted to be able to contribute to the company long term, and Defenders also has an excellent tuition reimbursement program. So I took full advantage of that. I was going at nights, weekends, working full time, and taking 3 or 4 classes a semester, which was really tough at times. But eventually in 2012, 15 years after I graduated high school, I graduated from IUPUI with a degree in business management. It's really important that we work harder on ourselves than we do on our jobs. I did that when I went back to school. One other way that I did that is I was a bit overweight, and something happened with my heart, and the doctor told me, he said, look, you're in relatively good shape for your age, but you're a little heavy and you should really lose some weight or you're going to have more issues down the road. So fitness became a priority in my life at that time, and I hired a personal trainer that I used for about 2 years. Working with that trainer really helped me grow because I learned all these things that I didn't know before about not only how to exercise, but how to eat right, how to set goals. Sometimes people come up to me and they ask me for tips on, how'd you do it? What's your workout plan like? Or, was it tough balancing your school and your work? How did you do it? And really my advice for anybody who's focused on growth is to really decide where you want to be, then find the people, find the resources, find the things that can help you get there, and just be a sponge, absorb everything that they have, maybe even have them help you set a plan. Within that plan, you've got to find ways to celebrate the small wins, because it's not going to be easy, it's not going to happen overnight. You've got to find those little milestones that you can celebrate to keep you motivated, and really it's up to you. All that information is there for you to use. You just got to put that plan together and decide to do it.
So the last thing Chris said in the video is you just have to put that plan together and decide to do it. I mean, it sounds so simple. It really is that simple. It all comes down to choice. What do you want? Have a plan, being a sponge, and demonstrating grit. Such a good example, Chris, is of the simple things that we can do to demonstrate that growth-oriented learner. This is such a gift for us. Aren't we so fortunate that we get to take time to focus on ourselves? It is a gift that we're given. I love our company. I feel so fortunate to get to do what we do. I love my team. We have a lot of fun and work really hard. And yet the most important relationships in my life are mom and wife. And personally, I am striving right now to really lean into this growth-oriented learner value, as this is a new family. So if I had spoken at last year's convention, this would be a very different conversation. I met my husband, Robert, last year, and we got married in January. My whole life I'd heard people talk about when you know, you know. And I'm like, well, I don't think so, because I've never known. And the first moment I saw that man, I knew. I took a lot of time after Mason. So there's my 14-year-old daughter, Mason. So her dad and I divorced in 2004. She was just a baby, and that was a tough time. And so I was single for 11 years, had some relationships, made some really bad choices during that time. And over the last couple of years, through my faith, through relationships, I've taken a lot of time to think about, personally, what do I want? And what do I want my life to look like? And so isn't it interesting then that Robert Butcher showed up? And so we're transitioning as we bring these families together. And so you can imagine, a 14-year-old that has had a single mom for 11 years. It's been a time of transition for sure. She used to love to come to my house, and it was all nice and quiet. Now we have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old running around. And it's a lot of fun. And it's a lot of challenge. Dave, in his video, referenced Jim Rohn. There is a Jim Rohn quote that I've been leaning into a lot lately. Jim Rohn said, it's something Mike Lance reminds our team of a lot. Don't wish it was easier, wish you were better. Yeah, you guys know that one. And so evenings when, I've made pot pie, and Mason loves pot pie, and Alex doesn't like pot pie, or I got to have that sweater to go to school, and in the midst of all that change and transition, I really try to lean into what can I do to be the best stepmom, the best wife, the best mom. And really it just comes down to lots of love. So no doubt there are tough moments. And there's lots of people that we can learn from in the tough moments. I want to show you a video clip of a guy who finds himself in the midst of a really tough moment, and we can learn from what he does. So let's watch Jim Marshall.
Looking. Stops, throws, completes it to Kilmer up at the 30-yard line. Kilmer driving for the first down, loses the football. It's picked up by Jim Marshall, who's running the wrong way. Marshall is running the wrong way, and he's running it into the end zone the wrong way, thinks he scored a touchdown. He has scored a safety. His teammates were running along the far side of the field, Russ, trying to tell him, go back.
Oh my God. Yeah. How many of you know that story? Yeah. Oh, that poor guy. Oh. But here's why I love this story. Jim Marshall is a growth-oriented learner at its finest. So Jim Marshall was a defensive end for the Minnesota Vikings. And during this game against the 49ers, you saw it, he picked up the football and ran 66 yards the wrong way to score a touchdown for the 49ers. But here's what that guy did. And he talks about this now as a motivational speaker. He talks about the defining moment where he was in the locker room at halftime, right after this had happened. And everybody was giving him a hard time, and he was devastated. He calls it the most devastating moment of his career. And he realized, I have a choice right now. I can sit here in my misery, I can make up all kinds of excuses, or I can go out the second half and play football. And so that's what he did. He actually played some of the best football of his career, and the Vikings won the game. And he talks about it today as the power of a moment and choice. He turned a really devastating situation into something really special. So maybe that challenge that you wrote down, maybe that thing that you're carrying around with you, maybe that's your cross to bear. Maybe that's your defining moment. Maybe that can be the thing that propels you. Again, completely up to you. So as we close it out, let's look back at our 4 things. And again, in relation to your challenge or anything that you're going through, what is it that you want? Nobody is going to come to you and say, here's your map. You get to create that. What are you creating? Because every time you say yes to something, every time you sign up for something, you're working towards something in the future. And without defining that, it's going to get decided for you. I want you to decide. That's what being a growth-oriented learner is all about. So know what you want. And then once you have identified those dreams, Matthew Kelly said that. What are your dreams? Once you've identified that, put some goals in place. And not just any goal, but what kind of goals do we set at Defenders? SMART goals. It wouldn't be a good talk, a growth-oriented learner talk without SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. And here's why this is so important, because we can dream and we can set goals, but what happens a lot of time is we put the someday on it. Yeah, that's something I really want to do someday. Well, someday is not an actual day. So figure out, what is the timing for me that's achievable, that's realistic. Put some timing around that. And then you can be a sponge. You've got your plan, so identify the resources and the people, the motors, the people that are going to get you jazzed up and excited about it. Find out who they are and ask for their help. And of course, through it all, because it's not where you are now, it's a future place, you're going to have to lean in and be gritty. But just how badly do you want it? Last week, I had something pop up for me that pulled a lot of energy and attention away. You know how those things can happen. And so I felt some distrust, and I felt really hurt that I wasn't involved in something. And so I talked a lot with my husband about that, and he reminded me, well, let's look at our plan. The exercise that you have in your workbook, we went through that as a couple about a month ago, and we built our plan. And so he said, let's look at the career goals that you set. Does this thing really matter in relation to what you want? It was so freeing for me. No, it doesn't. But that's what keeps us from getting to that place, is all the stuff that pops up. Without a vision of the future, we don't have that bigger yes inside to go back to. That's the power. That's the power of that plan. So I'll leave you with this quote, one of my all-time favorites. No one can go back and make a brand new start, but anyone, you, can start from right here and create a brand new end. Map your future. Guys, this is your life. Make it what you want it to be. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Andrea. Great message. So I got some bad news for you. Could be bad news if you choose to take it that way. You've just spent 7 hours with us, and those are 7 hours you can never get back. They're gone. Bye-bye. Now's the time to make a choice whether or not you're going to make those 7 hours an expense in your life, an expense that you get zero return on, or whether or not you're going to make these past 7 hours an investment into your life and make sure you get a return on. You remember I told you at the beginning that there was going to be a test? Here comes the test. And we've given you a lot of the answers, if not all of them. But some of the answers have to come from you. So we're going to spend a few minutes, grab your books where you've been taking notes, and I want you to spend time